Greetings and welcome to Office Hours. If you are new here and you want to learn a little bit more about what we do, head over to officehours.global. Our first hour, we answer your questions on media and digital productions of all kinds. And our second hour is something that we typically want to spend a little bit more time on. And today we'll be speaking about the future of AI in theater. And we have with us our very own Talak Lopez Waterman as he talks through how he's been using AI in theater. So go ahead and get your questions in early. And if you're in Mukana, go ahead and vote them up or down because this show is driven by you. And if you're wondering what is Mukana, well, head over to askofficehours.global or you'll see a QR code on your screen right now and go ahead and use it because we're looking forward to answering your questions as we get into today's show. Speaking of show, Mitchell, let's get this party started.
All right, party is started, Liberty. Thank you. With our first question is Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. A lot of Twitch streamers are single-person shows. What tools from that world could we reuse? How about a second hour with a large channel Twitch streamer going over their workflow?
I love that idea, Alex.
Yeah, we can go out and look and see what we can find as far as who we might be able to bring on to talk about Twitch. From the stuff that I've worked with Twitch streamers, a lot, OBS is very popular among Twitch streamers, as are a lot of Stream Deck integrations. So a lot of the Stream Deck stuff that you've seen, the automation, is something that a lot of Twitch streamers use heavily to kind of tie all that stuff together so they can jump back and forth between their graphics and their responses and their other pieces. Outside of that, it seems to be a lot very similar to what we use, but we'll reach out and see if we can't bring somebody on to talk about it specifically.
Chris?
Yeah, I remember when I first heard about Twitch and I started looking at what they were doing, I was like, what are they using? They must have a giant production switcher and, how are they're doing a picture-in-picture and where's that animation coming from? And that's where I first learned about OBS about 5 years ago, maybe. And, my mind was blown. It is basically, I have now learned those tools over time, mostly due to COVID and office hours. And I think that there's a lot we can use. I think we are using a lot of what they're doing. I think they're better at it than I am, that's for sure. They know more about what this stuff works. I know that just a couple weeks ago, I needed to figure out how to actually use the record function inside of OBS. And, it makes this ridiculous muxed file. And Jonas is like, oh yeah, we just have to demux it. Here, let me show you. And 2 clicks and 4 seconds later, I had a completely usable file. I would have argued with it with, Adobe Media Encoder or compressor or whatever. And he goes, no, just go click, done. So I agree. There's a lot to be learned from that space, that vertical, if you will. I'm continually amazed at what you can do. And yes, it does work on a Mac as long as you don't ask it to do too much.
And Courtney?
And as an adjunct to that, maybe get somebody in who does esports, because the equipment that is used for doing that kind of stuff, where you have to have individual cameras and all the players and the individual screens from each player and so on, big screen production, and the stuff that goes into an esports arena broadcast would be interesting too, the technology involved in doing that.
Yeah, and just their ability to their engagement part of things. That's the big thing about Twitch, is being able to continually communicate with your audience, bringing people into your streams, all of that. So that's a great idea. Looking forward to getting that on maybe on a Monday. Next question.
Next one in from Scott Hancock in Tokyo, Japan. ZoomISO and NDI seem like similar tools for extracting participants from Zoom. ZoomISO is so integrated now, but are there any cases where being sentenced to Windows where NDI has advantages?
Talak?
So the one thing I'll say about this question is that I would say that NDI and ZoomISO are slightly different in that NDI is a protocol of sending video across a network. And ZoomISO is a way to pull those videos out to a couple of different output types, like SDI through a Blackmagic card, or Siphon on the same computer, or NDI across a network. And those are different prototypes, protocols for outputting and transporting video. And then when it comes to, I think maybe what you're talking about is NDI screen scrape or NDI capture, and that possibly, or if a particular type of product like a Windows Teams meeting can output NDI, then you can take that same kind of video protocol and bring it out and use it in that way. So it's just a matter of thinking about whether you want to use Zoom or you want to use Windows or what you want to use, and then how you want to move that video and use it for your purposes.
Alex, oops, sorry.
And one last thing is that also Zoom Rooms can output NDI, and Zoom Rooms, that's another way to take an NDI video pipeline from Zoom and work with it. And sorry about that.
No worries, Alex.
And, Andy reached out as well. And so this is pretty much a lot of what Slalak said. But he said ZoomISO can export NDI from a Mac or PC. Zoom Rooms, which are cross-platform, can also send NDI. ZoomISO's core technology is also built into several cross-platform broadcast tools directly, like Wirecast, Epifan, and New Blue. NDI is a protocol supporting many of these apps, but the Zoom's technology is built into them directly, which is demonstrated in the vMix 27 beta, and it can be simplify the workflow a lot. And what Andy underlines is the big thing to avoid is screen scraping to get the ISO feed. So whatever you do, whether you're doing it directly or out there, screen scraping is not something that we should do anymore. Not with Zoom anyway. We have to do it with other applications because they are cave-like. But Zoom, we don't have to live that way. He didn't say that end part. I made that up.
Next question.
CJ Cavell from Downeytown, Pennsylvania, and right here on our panel, and also a QR code question, asks, when NFL broadcast from Europe, how do they staff for the production, and how much of the staff travels versus pulling from local crews?
CJ?
Yes, I was watching with some friends yesterday, and I usually don't watch the Europe games, but they made a comment that, oh yeah, the production's getting a lot better. And I never really thought about it. So I figured this is a great time to flex the QR code. So here we go.
Nice. Alex?
Well, and the good news is that CJ got this in really early, so we had time to have it kind of bounce around a little bit internally. And so here's a fairly detailed answer. Bo reached out, or I reached out to Bo, and Bo gave us a little insight here and said someone in our community actually worked on an NFL game in London last season for the ESPN. He said that they brought over the core production group from one of ESPN's college football broadcasts. This included the producer, director, AD, TD, audio, GFX, and some replay ops and some camera ops. The engineering team and mobile units, along with a number of other crew positions, were sourced locally. On the in-venue side of things, the NFL brings in the same special event production team from Van Wagner that produces the in-venue LED shows for events like opening night, kickoff, and the Super Bowl. Van Wagner will bring in a front bench crew and GFX support to augment the stadium's normal video board crew. So that's the fairly and when you ask the questions early, we're really starting to work on getting out to folks within our community that have some detailed answers, and we're going to kind of keep on trying to trickle them through as best we can.
And Courtney?
Yeah, I've always wondered about that, Alex. If they're doing a broadcast for American television from London, do they use local hardware? In other words, the trucks, do they come from, are they PAL trucks and they just scan, convert, and send it over to
most
the
trucks
States,
most trucks can flip. So, most trucks that we work with can go from PAL to NTSC. They're not usually limited. I mean, almost all the equipment that's in the trucks.
What about the cameras and stuff? Those aren't flippable usually.
Usually they are.
Right?
Yeah. Usually you can set those cameras to PAL I actually don't know for sure what they do there, but I know that we flip stuff there all the time to match ours. Because, for instance, when you stream to YouTube or Facebook, it is always 30 frames a second, whole frames,
right.
Not 29.97, not 25, not 24. It's 30 or 60. You can do 60 for games or on that engine, but that's it. And so we have to flip these trucks pretty regularly to make sure that we're matching them. And I don't think there's been any time when we were overseas that we we had to go 25 and then at the very end go to, I mean, unless it was being delivered to the local market at the same time over broadcast, then you do have to do that. So that's the only time we've had to make that work, and it looks horrible. Like, well,
yeah, the scan conversion is not.
I don't think the average person notices, but I'm always like chunky. You know, when it goes from 24 or 25 to 60 or 30, if you know what you're looking for, it's just chunky.
And then just from the chat, Mickey adds that NFL broadcasts, including those originating from the U.S., use crew from all around the world. So having that international flavor to them. Next question.
Vic Hernandez from Springfield, Missouri is here with a question. When we get back to them, how about a second hour on culture? How to instill one that promotes personal and business growth and a robust industry.
Go ahead, Nigel.
I'm sure many of us would be happy to get involved in that, although I think we're probably going to have to break the problem down because culture is a big thing. There's quite a lot to how do you create a culture, but there's also quite a lot to how do you maintain it and how do you manage it. But, you know, the simplest answer to this question is always behave in the way you want others to behave. Be the mirror you want to be for other people. If you just display the right behavior, they'll follow you.
Alot?
Yeah, I think that this is an interesting topic, and I think it would be really interesting to kind of dig down on it. I've always wondered, how it is that different businesses that I deal with as a consumer are so different. You know, when you call customer support in one business, it is like totally different than when you call customer support at a different business. And how do they get there? You know, it's not about the rules. It's about something else. And so my question is, how do they get to that point when you leave going, I was really upset with something in this product, and now I'm like, okay, I'm cool. We got to a place that's good. Or you are talking to the phone company, and you never are resolved ever. So like, what's the difference?
And Alex?
Yeah, it's really interesting that I've worked in a lot of Fortune 10 companies and Fortune 100 companies. And the cultures are completely different between each one of them. And to the point, I think this would be a fascinating conversation to the level that we can talk about it. But each company definitely has a different view of, and it permeates everything. And it is kind of magical, especially when you deal with a company that has 100,000 employees or more, that when you go from one to another, you expect them all to be kind of corporate, but they're corporate. There's some things that are the same. And then there are some things that are very different between the companies, and it comes down to the stuff that's on the walls or not on the walls, even the way people dress. You go to some companies and it's wild and people are doing all kinds of crazy. And you go to other companies and it's all like very drab. Like everything's very very gray, gray and dark and everything else. And it's really interesting how that culture kind of grows up within these larger companies, and it's one of the reasons they don't. Sometimes absorb where you really get into trouble is when two companies with two different cultures merge and they're equal size. So you'll notice that some companies will only pick up companies that are very small in relationship to them, because having those two cultures collide can be very difficult and almost impossible to manage.
And Chris?
I would love to know the history of these two words, corporate culture, or phrases, corporate culture and corporate branding. I think that if we look at those words just historically, there's going to be a point where all of a sudden it became like kind of cool that we're all talking about our corporate culture or our corporate branding. And I think that there were probably companies, I always go to Coke when I think about branding, Coca-Cola, where, sorry, I just wanted to be sure, where it's sort of ingrained in the company, and it wasn't an initiative like from the top down, like we're going to fix our corporate culture. It just sort of was. And then once that title gets maybe referred to, say, that company, then all of a sudden it becomes something that we can almost talk about, by giving it a label. We've given humans the power to talk about that topic. And then all of a sudden it starts to affect other companies. Obviously, we want to look at companies that have been successful and say, how can we be more like them? Well, it's their corporate culture. Ooh, there's a word. Let's talk about that. And I would love to know the history of when, corporate brand was first used, or corporate culture, because I think it would give us some insight into how this happens. I think some companies are just plain good at it. They don't even think about it. And then there's the ones that want to be good at it, lean heavily on the words and the language, and then it's off from there.
I think you're onto something there, Chris, because when Nigel started and just breaking out, like, we probably do need to break it out. And I thought about, there are people who are still in like their startup or solopreneurs phase, and how you really want to set yourself up for success if you do want to grow and scale, and what culture looks like there, and preparing for that. But then also those who might have a larger team, and then what that looks like. And we did this project a couple of weeks ago, just doing an interview series. And one was with someone who was really big on customer experience. So now to throw in another, term in there, the culture, the branding, and the experience, like they all tie in together. So there could be makings of a series there to really unpack that, and how do you take the next steps, and how do you make that work? And also, we've got this new generation coming. Are we at Gen Z? I think there's an alpha behind them. I'm still working through that. But the need to have a strong, or be very clear on your company culture, because then how do you embrace that next generation who, they don't look like any generation that's come before them, and how they envision work-life balance. So there's a lot to unpack there. And I want to bring in, because the chat is firing up. And so Vic mentions that T-Mobile had teams to instill like the T-Mobile culture into this into Sprint. So being very specific there. Robert also says HR culture, be afraid, where innocent people have to prove their innocence but are fired anyways. And then John says culture is the result of behaviors. Alex?
Yeah, and it really does. The culture really permeates everything in these companies. It's who they hire. Like, they'll make a decision. This person fits into. When I got a job at one company, I realized I went to the interview and all they wanted to do is know what I looked like. Like I just realized that it was like they had a bunch of conversations with me, not just what I look like, but how I hold myself, and how I talk and everything else, and will I fit. There was no content that we talked about. I just realized they had decided that I'm probably a good fit, but they wanted to make sure I wasn't going to destabilize the team, for what in what, not so much how I look, but just like, am I going to fit into this team? Do I look like I'm part of that team? And so I think that those things, but it's also, what they put on the walls, what speakers they bring in, how often do they do, all hands. All hands are so, like, it is the secret sauce, in my opinion, is all hands. And you watch companies that can weather big storms, and a lot of them are doing all hands every week, and it's, is to have this, give people an opportunity to ask questions and say what from the CEO's position or from the C-suite, these are things that are important to us. But they express those things all the time. The kind of bands they bring to their events, the kind of, all of those things. And I think that it's really fascinating, because, again, as someone who's worked as a gray badge, yellow badge, orange badge, red badge, blue badge, you learn a lot about how these different companies approach that problem.
Nigel?
Yeah, I guess my net ad here is that your organization has a culture, whether you like it, know it, or don't. And putting no effort into your culture doesn't mean you don't have a culture. You've got one, you just don't manage it, don't control it. And so typically in stuff I've done, first thing you have to do is assess what the culture is, assess what you want the culture to be, and then build a plan to get from one to the other. And that can be a tremendously complicated and difficult thing to do. But it's doable. It's hard work, but it's all about the behaviors of the people to each other and the principles upon which you manage the team.
And CJ?
If people are really interested in this topic, one book that I really recommend is from 2001. A lot of us have read it or are familiar with it. Jim Collins' Good to Great. They I guess it was a study of about 1,400 companies. They found a subset of 11 of them that went over a 40-year period, went from good to being great. And then they compared them to other companies in the same vertical that just maintained. And they really took a breakdown of what made Eckerd different from Walgreens, what made Scott Paper different from Kimberly-Clark, et cetera. Really, really worth your time reading. The whole series is wonderful.
Next question.
And it's from Andy Kokendorfer from Vieira, Florida. How do you measure the effectiveness of a streaming series like Office Hours? What metrics would you use to show success?
Go ahead, Alex.
Average view time over 15 minutes. Like that's what I measured. like that's MVP. And then average view time. We can always turn the dial up on how many people are watching. That's just a function of marketing. It's how long will they stay is the thing that we pay a lot of attention to. So we average, I think, in the ballpark of 22 minutes a show, which if you talk to YouTubers, it's a very long time. so it's a very high number. But average view time is the number one thing that we, or dwell time is the number one thing that we pay attention to. Again, we can turn pipes up to have more people watching. But what we really focus on is how long are they watching.
Mitchell?
Alex, can you apply a little bit of the methodology that we did in radio, which was your average quarter hour and your time spent listening? Does it make sense how many quarters you get out of a particular?
You just don't get the data in that way from YouTube. So you get an enormous amount of data. Like we definitely are able to watch. Now, one of the things that I look at in our live is the direction of the curve. So what you want to see, and we see this almost every day, but what you want to see here is if you think about the curve and this is time, right? And this is the number of viewers. What you want to see is something that starts like this and just keeps going up like that and then drops off. Like that is it's a very healthy live stream, from what you're doing. What you don't want to see is, something that starts, here and then just kind of goes like that. It just means you're boring. so if you see that, it just means people are just slowly leaving. They're leaving faster than they're coming in. And then you also, like if you see things like, if you go through here and you see something that might start like this, and then it goes up like this, and then it goes down like that, and then peters out. So something happened. What we look at when we look at the live stream itself is that, something happened right there. And that's usually someone tweeted it, someone said something, someone, so you get this punch. People watch for a little while, and then oftentimes, depending on how sharp this is, somebody said something or did something that people decided if this becomes a certain steepness, it means that a bunch of people decided they don't want to play anymore. And this is worse usually than this, because it means if you have a steep curve, it means that you really turn people off, in there. And there's some people who they build their product around that, and that's fine. That's not our product. And so it depends on, I don't like to see that, there. I think that's usually an unforced error when I look at it. So anyway, that's how we look at the live streams, that we're managing. And so I look at them every week. I mean, I definitely pay attention to those, but I'm not paying attention to total I do pay attention when it's unusually high. So when I see something that's like, wow, we had, an unusually high, what were we doing there that was different than what we do otherwise? I mean, because we're pretty consistent with the number of viewers. It'll peak probably somewhere between February and March, and it'll trough somewhere between August and early September, and then it just kind of fades up and down. And it's not that large of a number, but that's because we've been simmering for a long time, and we're getting ready to turn this on. We were about to turn it on this fall, and then we had all this moving going on. So we're going to finish that, and then we're going to start to see, over next year, we're going to see how we will change to we're not going to change the content, but the way we promote the show will be focused much more on numbers than, total viewer numbers than, we know that we've solved the problem about average view time. So now we're going to solve the next problem.
I was actually curious if there's a metric that isn't necessarily there in YouTube, but that you would like to see, like,
Oh, yeah.
because of the nature. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we ask for the same thing from everybody all the time, which is we want exit and entry data. So right now, that graph I just showed you is the equilibrium between people entering and people exiting. It is not how many people are coming in and how many people are going out. And so we want to see that. Like and we've built it into systems that when we control the stream completely, we've had Akamai build reports for us that do that for us, and it is fascinating. It's a truly fascinating number, a stat that nobody gives us, but that's useful. Other data that's really useful is where do people come from? That data you get, like did they come from this? Did that? What platform are they on? We know that, for instance, our show is about 70-75% some version of an Apple platform is watching. Like it's in that ballpark most days, and so those are the kind of things that we can pay attention to. We know the percentage of people in the United States. We know the average age, gender. All those things are things that we have, and I look at those every week and think about them. Like the one mistake people make is they look at things and they knee jerk, I have to fix this and I'm going to do all these things to fix it. I'm not really that. What I've learned is that you watch the numbers and then you slowly pay attention to it and slowly try to make moves and just slowly kind of think about those things to try to affect a number. If you move too quickly, you are zigzagging. It's exactly the same as if you're in a car and you're backing up and you're suddenly swinging back and forth trying to overcorrect. You just have to kind of keep pointing towards the middle and trying to find it. Oh, and by the way, can I say one? I had to one other note from the past. After I was so sure of it, I was corrected that ESPN did produce the whole show in 1080p 50, and then it was converted at 60. At 60, it has to do with a little bit of broadcast and a little bit of house power. So anyway, just there's a minor correction of the thing that I thought I was there. So a little more information that rolled in while we were talking.
And that's what you can do on a live show.
When we have good people in the back, we have a really good folks in the back end. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Bo.
Next question.
And it's from Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, Canada. OpusAI has added support for the AV1 codec. Are we starting to see mass adoption?
Jason?
The short answer is yes. So a lot of this just comes down to the almighty dollar. But yes, AV1 is 30% better compression as a rule over HEVC and VP9. But at the end of the day, it's really all about the fact that it's a royalty-free license. And that free tends to be the best price.
Alex?
When Apple spends good money, millions and millions of dollars, putting an AV1 decoder into the hardware, not into the software, but in the hardware, probably the future. That's all I'm saying.
And Courtney?
Yeah, as the chip manufacturers are incorporating that codec into their hardware, it'll spread faster. And of course, because it does 30%, it's a 30% savings on bandwidth. So, all of the cable companies and everybody else who, charges has to use that bandwidth and pay for that bandwidth is going to adopt it because it's going to save them 30% off the top. And it gives you, a much better look at a lower bandwidth. So also it's designed for the internet, whereas the other H.264, 265 were designed for broadcast and cable with a connected thing, so you didn't have to deal with IP-based data with packet loss and multiple paths and so on, and AV1 takes all that into consideration, so it's much better at reconstructing a signal at the other end that travels over the internet.
Go ahead, Talib.
So first rule of thermodynamics, there's no free lunch. So who gets paid? What's happening here? Can anybody explain that?
It's who's not paying. So it's basically all these big companies decided that the MPEG consortium was crazy and they were going to improve this so that they don't have to pay. That's who's getting paid. It's not getting paid, it's who's not paying. All the big companies, it's such a great lesson in overplaying your hand, is that the MPEG consortium overplayed its hand over and over and over again, and the big companies people, some of them still bought into it. So you think that it's winning and you're making the money and everything else, but they were conspiring. Like they were all talking to each other like, hey, this is crazy that we have to pay for this. And this is crazy that we have to do this. And you have them all talking to each other, talking about how we don't want to do this anymore. And then at some point, long after they paid you and said everything was fine and took you out to dinner and bought you big steaks in Las Vegas during NAB, they suddenly snap and suddenly you have a consortium that everybody's here. We don't want to do this anymore, and we're going to build. We can invest capacity for it, and companies should very closely watch what these kind of things look like because a company oftentimes will get a winning formula, and they will just keep working that formula because it's winning, not realizing that every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and you just have to be very careful of how you press down on that, and because you don't know. When you press down on it, you don't know where that's going to squirt out. like where it's going to come out when you push down. But when you're pushing down on something, you're pushing out reaction, and that reaction can come from a lot of different directions.
And then just coming from our chat community here in Mukana, John says YouTube is using it. I can't imagine a wider spread adoption. Go ahead, Chris.
Courtney, I like what you said about bandwidth, and Alex, what you were saying about it's what you don't pay. A friend of mine told me a story, and I can't remember who it was. He worked for the phone company many, many years ago. And when they changed the font that they used in the phone book, they saved millions of dollars in ink. Same information was being dispersed, but it cost them way less money. And all they had to do was change the font. Same kind of thing. You change the codec, you don't have to pay MPEG. Same information is being dispersed, saving tons of money.
Alex?
And the argument was also because it's more efficient, you also aren't paying for the bandwidth as well. So you're winning in two different places. Now MPEG it has H.266 or whatever, which is supposed to be much more efficient than H.265. But AV1 was all these companies saying, we don't want to play anymore. Like we can figure this out ourselves, and we can do this, go down our own path to make that happen. But to your point also is, when you think about it, like fonts get really expensive and they're really difficult to work with. And when you look at what happened, Google just started producing fonts that are very similar. Microsoft did that to some degree, but Google has all these open fonts that are very similar. You can't copyright the fonts in the same way. And so they're very similar to other fonts, but they're not exactly the same. And they push those out because that makes it less expensive for them. It also makes it less expensive for all of their customers. And it's I'm surprised that Google hasn't built a whole foundry that just did this for hundreds and hundreds of fonts. I'm kind of surprised they've left it so simple because it's such a small cost for them to rebuild fonts. Maybe they would have gotten more friction, but it definitely, those are the ones you see on the web all the time because they're free. And so you just have to always, companies have to always be careful of how they interact with that ecosystem and making sure that they're part of that and understand, how they, what the impact is.
Next question.
Christian Unakuzo from Ottawa asking, hello, I'm a recent resident in Canada and a junior in the city. I'm eager to immerse myself in the filmmaking and video editing community here. Do you have any recommendations for websites or resources where I can find job openings and internships? Thanks.
Go ahead, Alex.
The Production Hub is usually a pretty good one to start with a little bit. That works in a lot of different places. At least it's seeing what's going on. You're going to want to start figuring out what films are going on. Talk to event companies. A lot of times you can find your way into being a PA. I had someone who was way overqualified PA one of my shows in Washington, D.C. So he just came in as a PA. We really realized very quickly. I mean, this guy builds studios, super technical. And so we had him PA a couple times, and then we had him be the engineer for us a couple times, and then I hired him. And he worked full-time for me until he left for me, and now he is like lead of engineering at Eurovision, which wouldn't like remote engineering or whatever in the U.S. for Eurovision. And that would not have happened if he had not shown up as a PA. like, in my, and he just came to me and he just said, I just really like what Pixelcore is doing. I watch it and I just want to be part of this. And, and then he executed, and so the key is to find PA jobs, when you're trying to get into a new place, find PA jobs and then don't overplay your hand. We were just talking about that, but just be super useful, be great and part of the team. Don't talk about all the things and that you're just doing this to get your foot in. Just be a great PA, and then people will hire you, and then you can slowly fix things and slow things. But the biggest problem PAs have is they come in and they did go to school for this, or they do other things, and they tell you about it all the time, and more importantly, they tell your clients about it all the time. And then you're like, oh, I'm not going to use that person again. In my world, if someone says that person's very chatty, that's a nice way of saying we're not going to bring them back. They're not client facing, like they talk too much. But being very chatty is usually a death knell to most people who are, especially when you're starting. You can do it if you're really advanced, but not when you're getting your first time on your team.
Courtney?
Yeah, I'm not, it's been a while since I've worked in Canada, and I've always found it difficult to work in Canada because Canadians are very picky about letting non-Canadian residents or citizens work in especially in the film and television industry. They seem to be very upset about outside people coming in to work there. So, Christian, I hope you are a naturalized citizen of Canada, or you have immigrated and established a residency there, because then it will be a lot easier for you to get work. And maybe Alexander can let us know what the work situation is like in Canada these days, and whether they've opened it up any, or are still as picky about how long and where you can work if you're not a Canadian citizen.
Yeah, if you're throwing it to me, I don't have anything to add because I don't work in that industry. Sorry.
No problem. Well, hopefully I can add some, as a born Canadian, just add some flavor to that. You can definitely look at sites like meetup.com. That's where I found in the past, like a lot of active groups, whether they be film, outside photo, etc. The film community is very robust. So you just really, if you're willing to just show up, as Alex said earlier, just say, hey, I'd like to volunteer. I'd like to help. I think, Alex, you might have said this too. If not, I'll expound on it a little bit more, of just like seeing events. And when you see some of those camera ops, being helpful is always a good thing. There's TIFF. So if you go to tiff.net and just look up, they have a lot of programs where student related programs, because I see that you say junior. So I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're in school. So from that vantage point, people are always willing to help students, especially if you show interest from there. So yeah, look at meetup.com, look at Eventbrite, because a lot of people post their community events on Eventbrite as well. So that can kind of just help you figure out where you want to be and go. And if you are in Ottawa, you're like 5 hours from Toronto. So maybe a weekend trip or even just outside of the city to just get out there and get to know some more folks in the community. Alex?
Yeah, and you might want to look at Rogers Communications. So there is so by law, Rogers has to produce enormous amounts of multi-language content. And so I'm not sure what your background is, but they may be building it in your language. I mean, they build a lot of multi-language content out of Rogers, and it's by law they have to support it. And so they have programs for that, and they have very small budgets to do that, which means they're always looking for interns and PAs and everything else to get in there. And getting into Rogers, if there's a pipeline there, if you find Rogers Communications, and I would literally walk up to go to their broadcast center if there is one in Ottawa. I bet you there is, and just say you're looking for an internship or you're looking for a PA position. I know many people in Rogers that started as PAs and ended up as producers and everything else over time. Like, you have to be very patient as you start to work this. But I have definitely seen people be successful by working their way up through the Rogers broadcast system, because they've almost no budget for some of these multi-language stuff, and they just start trying to do the best job they can.
And one more quick pro tip, going to the municipality or the provincial site and going to that economic development channel where it's film and entertainment or digital media, typically they'll have a list of either schools or jobs there as well. So that's just another, just another channel and avenue that will help you, or even just calling the film office and getting to know people. Like, this is a relationship business. So introducing yourself, saying you're new to the city, that's what these economic development agencies and departments are there for, is to help people get jobs. So hopefully that's helpful. Next question.
It's a QR code question coming in from Unawahi Black Bear Marshall from Ohia. I listen to pre-show audio when making my deliveries and prefer its low bandwidth stream. Hasn't been on until just before show starts for over a week, and no show at all for a few Sundays. Looks like someone decided to end this playout for people. Why?
Alex?
This is just a hangout from our transfer to the new system. So we closed up office hours and we're streaming from a new system, and we need to get it back on. We'll get it back on over the next week or so. So by this time next week, you probably should see that stream. We'll make sure that we prioritize that. I apologize. It's been a week. I know that people have been listening to it in that radio mode, and we've been putting out a series of little fires of just making sure that everything's working for the main show, but then we'll backfill that and get it in there. We really think that the radio show or the radio app is going to become probably one of the primary places that people hear the show over the next year. But we're just in a transition mode. But be patient, and again, by the middle of the month, we'll have it running for you.
Next question.
Matthew from Oakland, California has a QR code question. What is the preferred method for recording the program out feed from an ATEM switch?
Jason?
I'm going to assume that you don't mean a switcher and instead mean a router. I guess either way, it's going to be about the same. Ideally, you want to be able to duplicate the program outstream such that if your recording device fails, you're not going to actually lose your feed out. And assuming that's the case, it doesn't really matter how. I like using hardware. I like the HyperDecks, especially the higher end full 1 RU mounts. You don't need an extreme 4K HDR or anything like that. But yeah, just get an ISO and loop out.
Go ahead, Alex.
Preferred. That's what you said. So there's what you can do, and then there's preferred, and you didn't give us a budget. So I'm going to tell you the way that we do it. So we record our programs we record them all with HyperDecks, and typically the full size HyperDecks, because we've had some recording issues on the smaller ones. We record an Apple ProRes 422. If it's going to be need to be color corrected, we'll go up to HQ. If it's just corporate and very long and we're not going to color correct it, then we go down to LT to manage bandwidth, but it's all ProRes. We record to the SSDs. We do not record to SanDisk because they fail. So Samsung, like the 900 series, are what we use for those SSDs. We record the program, and then we record a clean, which should be not your lower thirds and everything else, which is also a backup to the program. And then we record an ISO of every source that's coming in to that system. So that is the preferred way that we find it, in a lot of our clients prefer it. It's an expensive solution. You can definitely switch down and make it much more affordable by having your ATEM Mini Extreme, switcher just record all those channels for you in H.264. I will warn you that I've had enough failures. The percentage of failures of the ATEM Extreme is high enough, like 25%, where I didn't get the whole show. That I will now always record the program in a separate thing just to make sure I have a program. It saved me a couple times, and I don't know why. I don't know what it is, but I don't use it that often, mostly because the first time it happened, it failed, and then I so it's just, I don't know what it is. It just stops recording. It's just like, no, again. And it's T5 drive, brand new, like blanked out, everything else. And so I've had enough failures with it. I won't depend on it. I do grab it for convenience. And when it works, I'm like, oh yeah, that's great.
Courtney?
Yeah, I agree. The HyperDeck's good, or the Video Assist. If you're using one of those, they also record in H.264 or ProRes or DNX. It depends on what your purpose of the recording is. If it's just to archive it or just to have a backup of your other recordings, you can do something like I use these H.264 recorders. They have HDMI pass-through, so you could run your program output HDMI right through one of these little boxes. They're about $100 to $125, and they record onto a USB stick your program at H.264 along with the audio. Single button to record, easy peasy, no software. It doesn't crash. It can record in 720 or 1080p.
And Jason?
I should have known that Alex was going to harp on preferred. Okay. One of the best kept secrets from the Blackmagic line is that even the lower end HyperDecks can be plugged into this rack mount that will take regular SSDs, and it works beautifully. So another really inexpensive way to have good failover recording is not the cheapest, not the 1/3 RU, because those love to overheat, but the half mount RU, they're just fantastic if you just plug them in via USB-C directly into Blackmagic's multi-dock 10G.
And Chris?
Alex, I want to go back to your comment about 25% of the ATEM Extreme records fail. Are those long records?
Yeah.
But
2 to 3 hours.
Okay. All right.
Their shows.
I got you. Yeah. I was kind of shocked to hear that, but I've never tried to record anything over an hour.
Yeah. No, they're all over an hour. And they got about an hour and a half, and then they just stopped. I looked down and it wasn't recording anymore. So no error, just no recording.
Yeah. One thing I really wish that they would give you as an option is to enable which inputs you want to record. Because quite often I'm recording, 3 inputs and it records 8 and 5 of them are black.
It's been the problem that Blackmagic's had in the past. Like, for instance, if you do record audio on a HyperDeck, it records 16 channels of audio. It used to, I think it now doesn't, but it used to just do 16 channels of audio all the time, which confused the heck. I mean, just ground Final Cut into the ground. Like, it was just, like opening all these. And so we had to go in and delete all these channels to make sure that we could, poor Mike Matsdorf one time. We just had to spend a whole day just doing that. Anyway, yeah.
Next question.
Eduardo Augustine from Panama City, Panama asked, I haven't had clients for a couple of months now, 4 months. What can I do in the meantime to keep the small business going on event streaming?
Alex?
Yeah, the one thing that I will say is that keeping busy is really important. So this is a great question, is that you don't want to stop doing things. You want to use this time to get better at things, to work on, skill sets and so on and so forth. I would, typically I would look at nonprofits, small businesses, people that can't afford what you do, but you would definitely benefit them. Remember, nonprofits have board members, and board members are typically people that are well connected within the community and well connected. And if you suddenly show up for those things, you start getting introduced to other people before you know it, you're doing more work. So definitely think about what those actually look like.
Mitchell?
Yeah, Alex has good advice there. I usually pick one nonprofit a year and concentrate on doing something for them, just cover my outside expenses and do the very best job that I can. It looks good on your resume, and like Alex says, you never know what kind of friends you're going to make in the process. The other thing is we're in a bit of a trend, and spotting a trend is important. The trend is that corporate and pharmaceutical work is slacking off in this area of the country. It's time to diversify, and that means you need to start looking elsewhere for business down the road before it's a problem.
Yeah, just picking up from what Mitchell just shared, this could be an opportunity for you to also look at this as maybe a business development season where you are making sure you're going out to events, introducing yourselves to some organizations that make sense for you. If you know what your sales cycle, not even cycle, but how you get your leads, then double down on that. Something you can do like right now today is craft some sort of email to some people that you've either worked with in the past and ask for some referrals, and or just even letting family and friends know hey, this is just a reintroduction to some of the things that you do. So all of those activities will, one by one, help you get to the pipeline of just having your pipeline going. Because as you say here, with just being a small business, because that's some of the challenges at that time, because you're so focused on the client and the client work that if you're not constantly filling the pipeline, that you can run into areas where it's like, oh, now there's a dry season. And last part of that is this being the end of the quarter, a lot of companies are already looking at their Q1, their Q2. So that's why I say just even doubling down on getting out there, getting your name out there, and getting into people's Rolodexes so that you will be top of mind for those projects that they're planning for right now. So this might be a really great opportunity for you at the same time. Jason?
The Joker on Batman Begins had half of the truth. So here's half the truth. If you're good at something, never do it for free. The other half of it is, if you haven't done it for 4 months, get better at it. And there are a lot of opportunities to do that.
Talak?
So this reminds me a little bit of the time, during the pandemic when all theaters closed. And so I was, what am I going to do? And so there was some time where I took some time off, which hadn't happened in 20 years. You know what I mean? So there's that side of things. But also I started getting questions about doing theater on Zoom, doing theater on video, changing the way and I had to change the way I looked at things. So stepping outside of your particular paradigm and looking at it from the other way can be incredibly, incredibly powerful. In Panama, I don't know if you already had an international client base, but you could potentially start reaching out further, cast the net a little wider. And even if that's a matter of working with folks, on a volunteer basis, just to build your list of contacts and your list of collaborators even in the time when you have time to do that. And I think that some of what we've done in the community of office hours has been that for me, as things shifted during the pandemic. Now I'm pretty busy when it comes to my day job being a lighting designer. And so these things come and go and they shift and they change. And so, just keep pushing at making yourself better.
And then pulling in from the community here, John says, schedule time to work on the business, not just in the business. And if you have a small business association or a chamber of commerce in your locality, join it. Next question.
Chris Sabato from Albany, Oregon asks, using Dante Virtual Soundcard with just a single in and out, is there a disadvantage of sending DVS to 16 or 32 so the I/O number matches in my X32? For example, DVS 16 subscribes to X32 16.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I think the answer is it's a networking question. If you have infinite bandwidth, then there's really no issue. If you have a gigabit bandwidth and you're doing things generally at a fairly low sample rate, 48K, you'll probably be fine. But the moment you increase your sample rate, you reduce your bandwidth available. So it's really a bandwidth in question. And so what I've discovered in my little world is A, I have a completely separate network for my Dante. And B, I've tried to be economic, not to use processing power either on my machines or in the network I don't need. So I've thought very much more. Plus the fact I have 2 or 3 machines that I talk to my X32 with. So quickly, I'm going to have that problem that they can't all be on 1 to 16. But it's really a networking problem. There's not a lot of great data that I found that answers the question, if I allocate 16 but only use 3, what does that mean bandwidth-wise? And someone wiser than me may know the answer to that. But I've tried for my own environment to manage the network by assuming that it's a scarce resource and not allocate what I didn't need.
Next question.
Michael Patra from Poland. Is there a cheaper alternative to Sennheiser MZA 900P to run a Sennheiser ME2 mic?
Alexander.
There is, and it should work. Rode makes a little adapter, called the VXLR Pro that will convert 48 volts phantom power down to the plug-in power that most labs use. That should work. I did take a look at that Sennheiser. It does look like it offers a few features which they obviously charge a premium for. It's got a couple of gain settings on there, plus it has a high pass filter, it looks like. So they charge quite a bit more money for that, but the Rode adapter, which I think is $40 or $50 US, should work, and I'll post a link in the chat.
And Courtney?
Yeah, it depends on your purpose. If you're trying to go into a mixer that has 48-volt phantom and you don't want to deal with a battery-type power supply, the plug-in power of those ME2s is just between 1.2 and 5 volts is all you got to supply. And they plug in. There's a lot of transmitters and small small audio recorders that have plug-in power that will accept that 3.5 millimeter jack directly, so you don't have to go through that adapter. Another manufacturer is this one's $129, so it's about $50 cheaper, from Voice Technologies. It converts 48-volt phantom to the 3.5 millimeter plug-in power type connector. So you can get them out there. Some of them have transformers in them, but lately most of them are unbalanced, actually.
Next question.
Sean Johnson is here with another question. Hi, folks. I might be in the need to hire some freelance production techs, mainly control room positions. Is there a resource in the Office Hours community and Discord to post my request? Thanks.
Talak?
Yeah, so I think there's a channel called I Need Help in Discord, and that should be a great place for you to post those. And then, folks will respond with availability and with, the right kind of skill set, and then you can kind of start a direct communication from there.
And Alex?
And reading this, we really should have something that's more like I Need Help. I think gets mixed up with people that need help as opposed to people need people to help them. And so I think we should, we'll look at it on the back end, but we should probably have just job postings, like, hey, we're looking for these or positions available. We should put that in there. I think we've gotten to a point where we should make that available. So stay tuned for that.
Next question.
Andre Dole from Berlin. How do you motivate yourself if you have some working tasks to do that will take some hours, but you're tired of it?
Nigel?
So first of all, never leave a job to the last minute. I think all these people who say, well, I waited to the last minute until the exam paper, I just don't. Life stuff happens all the time. And if you wait to the last minute to do something, something's going to happen. But that's the simplistic answer. There's actually Scott Adams, the Dilbert guy, has a new book out called Reframe Your Brain. And the reality is much of this stuff is the way that you think about it. If you think about this work as tiresome, unnecessary, annoying, or something, guess what? It will be tiresome, annoying, and unnecessary. If you think about it as a key step in achieving something else, then reframe it to something that you want to get through and get done, rather than something you don't want to do but have to do.
CJ?
For me, it's about discipline. If you think that there is a project that's going to take multiple days worth of work to do, make sure that you're blocking off time to work on that specific project, and don't let anything but an absolute literal fire interrupt that. The other thing is, when you're starting your day, there's a phrase that I really like called eat your frog. Pick the thing that you're least looking forward to doing and do that first. Because when you get over that hump, all of a sudden the rest of the day, you feel like you've lapped everybody and you're just, you're cruising.
And Mitchell?
Yeah, the frogs is good advice. Do the things you don't like first. Reward yourself the things you do enjoy. And if both of those don't work, it's time for a vacation.
Go ahead, Alex.
Turn off notifications. Do not disturb. All the time. 100% of the time. Go into your computer and turn off every notification possible. It is the devil. Like, notifications are the devil.
That sounds like a shirt.
They were created by the devil to keep people from actually getting what they need to get done. So just say no. Say, get behind me, Satan. Anyway.
Yeah, turn those on. Keep, like Alex said, just I will put my phone outside, like hide it so that I'm not tempted to look or check because, just your hand. First thing in the morning, like, so I put that task, whatever that hard thing is before the world gets up, is get that out of the way. And as Mitchell said, like, there's some kind of reward. So if I do not get this task done, I cannot have this or that. Courtney?
Yeah, I always set a single goal for the day. A to-do list with 7 things on it, I'll never get any of them done, or because I'll say, well, I'll get to that later. I'll do this first because I'll do the ones I want to do first, and the ones that I don't like doing get pushed off and pushed off and pushed off. So I'll set a single goal for that day. My goal is to do all the laundry, etc. Hate doing it, have to do it. I'll establish that goal if I only set one goal a day. If I set multiple goals, I always fail.
And Mitchell.
And if you work at home, lock the refrigerator.
Next question.
Next one in from Jeff Hedberg in New York. A suggestion for a future show: how different members organize their business activities, show prep, knowledge, retention, etc., and general tools like Notion, AirTable, Microsoft Planner, Apple Notes. General workflow, tutorials not required.
Alex?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I mean, I think that, a lot of these businesses, we could probably break that out into a couple different places. And so I think we should definitely put that on the list. And I'm going to take this opportunity to say, hey, we're about to jump into the second hour and we're going to hand it off right now.
Welcome, second hour for Office Hours Global. Thank you so much, producers, for all of your fantastic questions. Keep them coming as we get into this conversation about the future of AI in the theater space. And we are so lucky to have our very own Talak Lopez Waterman, lighting designer, who has been integrating AI, artificial intelligence, into his workflow. So over the next hour, Talak will share some of his workflow, some of his experience with it. We'll probably talk about a little augmented reality in the mix of it. And this is just also an opportunity for all of us to reimagine or think of the ways that we can integrate this technology that has taken the world by storm and how we can use it practically, and just looking at what that looks like in the future. Talak, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, it's great to be here, and I think it's early days. I mean, a lot of times, very early on, even before I heard us in this group start talking about AI, I was working as a lighting designer on a show that had projection design, and I noticed that we'd have a comment or a note about an image in the projection design, and I would hear a bit of typing, and then all of a sudden there'd be a new image up, and I was like, what is actually happening right now? And I asked him, and he didn't want to admit it at first, but he then, because it was a year ago, and he wanted to sort of keep it on the down low because he felt like maybe people would be upset with him. But I think it was super, super powerful because it was the idea of taking, for example, the show was about South Africa. So there were images of South Africa that we wanted to use, but we didn't want to use them photographically. We wanted to use them as in a painterly way. And so he was able to ask for them in DALL-E, these images of the particular parts of Johannesburg, I think it was, in a particular painterly style. And this was even a year ago, and it was already, a pretty amazing output. And I was like, well, maybe you really shouldn't say anything about that, because this was before it was being talked about at all.
Right.
But then I started hearing about it here, and I thought, oh, well, maybe there is a real potential for this tool. The way that the tool has started to come forward for me very directly is that the sorry, one second. It is that the collaboration process has been expanded upon. So if we're sitting here talking about how to make something feel a particular way, and there's a particular artist that the director is interested in, instead of only just looking at that artwork and seeing the subject matter that that particular artist is using, we can take the subject matter that is appropriate for the show and sort of combine them in a supernova of ideas that then will pull us forward in the collaborative process. And I'm sorry to interrupt you there.
Oh, no. It wasn't an interruption because it, like, for those who are watching that, just even on our community in Discord, there was an article that was posted where they had interviewed yourself and I believe it was Jefferson
Rittenauer. Yep.
Yes, Jefferson Rittenauer, and just how you were both using it. And I think that just even this conversation overall will help people who are still, okay, AI, whether it be tech-averse and bringing it into their world, it's inevitable, but your journey of trying to see where it makes sense and then where it's like, this is not the place for it yet. And if you want to if you can think of a scenario where it's like, we thought that would have worked, but not yet.
Yeah, I think there's the other side of this too, right? I was talking a little bit about how exciting it is. There's the other side of it, and that is that I find that every time I ask for a prompt, there's something about these images that are coming back that are similar to the others. There's some through line there, and I can't quite pick it out. Like if I look through, I think in Midjourney, there's some Discord channels, and you can see a lot of people calling for a lot of different kinds of images. Those images feel like they're a single, very diverse artist, rather than a bunch of different artists coming together. So I'm trying to pick that out as an artist and as a person who has to deal with the visual for myself. What is that thing that looks the same about each one of these things, and how can I essentially blur that out if I need to use it? If I need to use it, what else do I need to add to this image to really make it feel less like one hand? And that's probably why I won't use it on a direct basis in what will be seen by the audience at the end of the day. I will use it in collaboration right now, and I will use it because and I tried. And sometimes I try and I say, because I want, for this recent show I did in Arizona, it was a world premiere of Frankenstein, a new opera. And we were doing a bunch of work with LED screens and fabric. And we were thinking about shadows and through the fabric, and how will that look, and how will it look? Will we be able to see those shadows in a crisp way or in a blurred way? And so I asked for images from a couple of these engines, and I asked for a large imposing man in shadow through a diaphanous material, and all I got was women. So it's probably, and Alex, you've said this many, many times, that it's probably my lack of prompting in the right way, but it's a learning process, and that's the kind of thing you run into if you're working on something and you need to collaborate on it right now. You throw it away fast, right? I gotta move to something else and pull some other images and work on this thing, because money is on the line. You've got to be able to make decisions fast, or not fast, but fast enough to set a decision about a particular hard thing that's going to be built that costs a lot of money, and the longer you wait, the more money it costs.
Right. And so now you've got the technical background to begin to see, like, okay, I see it, tools like whether it be the ChatGPTs, the Dollies. What would you say to those maybe smaller houses, theater houses, who see it but just don't even know where to begin? What advice would you give to them?
I think exploration is really important. A lot of times, some of this very smallest theater companies aren't going to spend the money on bringing in outside designers. They're not going to, they might have an in-house set of designers, and sometimes those are outstanding, fantastic folks. Like a guy or a gal that has a house gig designing, every day, every season, the same place, and it's in their hometown. Super awesome, right? Like I'm not trying to disparage that at all. But if they have less resources for even their own time, they may be able to utilize some of these ways to pull images out and get ideas, even if they're like a lot of times in a very, 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 very small theater, you might have one designer that's doing, and this happens in big theaters too, that's doing all of the disciplines, that's doing scenery and lighting and costumes. So, you know, if they can save themselves some time by having ideas blossom from this medium, then I think it's a super great thing.
And what are some of and we also spoke just in preparing for it today, the augmented reality part of it, in just how you're using like 2D, 3D, if you want to touch on that
absolutely.
a little bit more, because we have a lot of fans in the community of that space.
Yeah, so there was there was a lot of discussion about that in the article that you read, Liberty, and I think that's probably a more established process than even using AI, because what we do is we model the sets that we're working on, and we can look to see how the light, you know, interacts with that set before it's built, which is hugely important. And then we can also use an augment 3D in one of the lighting consoles, and then other what you see is what you get processes are available in other consoles. And what you do is you bring in the model of the theater, you bring in the model of the set, and then you can quite literally place the moving lights or even the static lights in place. You can focus them. I can grab with a mouse all of the moving lights and move them around the set and have it be real accurate to real life as to where I'm pointing it, which has become part of my workflow of late more than it ever has been, because I find it to be much faster, because I don't often in the design setups that I'm in, I'm asking a programmer to do things. And so if it's taking them forever to scroll up the pan and then scroll up the tilt, and then, you know, it takes time that we don't have. So to be able to ask them to just grab a mouse and point it at this door and have every moving light in the rig just point at it and be accurate, I find that to be incredibly powerful. And I've started to ask my programmers to do that. It's less easy to do if there isn't already a three-dimensional rendering or three-dimensional object of that particular set. So it's great working with folks like Jefferson, as we talked about, because he works from the beginning in 3 dimensions. So immediately I can just bloop, drop that into the light board and off to the races.
And as our panel, I see hands being raised and questions coming in from our community. Now, as a lighting designer, you've kind of spoken to us about how you are using, I heard the word collaboration, more of a collaborator. How else would you like to see, like what would maybe help solve some of your pain points in getting productions together, getting them prepped?
Yeah, and I mean, I am talking a lot about the very early days of this process, and for me, it's a really fun part. The part when I'm getting on a Zoom meeting with people from different parts of the country or world and talking to them about what we're about to do and getting excited about it. And, you know, as a lighting designer, it's always a bit of a pain point because my world is ethereal. It is not something that you can, well, some people can. I cannot paint, you know, the thing that I'm seeing very well and show it to somebody and let them see it so that they can understand where I'm coming from. So I've had to become very, very good at explaining what I want to do with my words. If there was some way where I could accurately output and quickly, because there's a quick component about it. You know, if you're working on 17 shows in a season, you've got to be able to really work fast in these ways. Otherwise, you know, going to paint for 30 hours in order to show something to somebody that they don't want to use is a problem, right? And so we've got to have economy of time for me. And so the ability to pull something out that is actually what I'm wanting to show. So if I could be way detailed with my prompts, maybe there's a lab in that here, you know, to learn how to do that so that it pops out what I'm actually thinking. That would be a game changer for me, because then it's not some other artist making something. It's me making something, right? So
that's a great point, Alex.
Yeah, I oftentimes find that it really is one of those things that you are trying to find something in your mind, that you're trying to show someone and trying to explain it. And I was talking to a fairly prominent director about this, and they use Midjourney a lot to do this, but they still have unlimited resources to have people sketch stuff for them. They said the big thing is I can sit there in an evening while I'm watching TV, just running through ideas of dancing with the prompts and everything else. And then I bring over 3 or 4 things, which I hand to a concept artist and go, this is the feel I'm looking for. This is the kind I'm looking, but I need this to be over here. And it's so much faster for the artist. The artist understands where I am and what I'm thinking and everything else. And there's this guesswork because, when you look at these Midjourney these Midjourney renderings, the amount of time that it would take somebody to do. So I was, Mitch will enjoy this one, I think. Oh, Mitch's not here anymore. I'm fiddling with a music video. And so I was fiddling with like trying to do concepts of it. Now this is a little this will twinge a couple people, but this is I was doing there's a thing called by Nine Inch Nails called Head Like a Hole, and I've been working on this music video on and off for about 10 years. And so there's this one chorus that said there, and so I was working on this concept, and Midjourney did this in about a minute, and the thing is the amount of time it would take, because there's this chorus where it's like bow down to, and I try to get that, me figuring that out. I could try to talk to someone about that. It would take them a long time and cost me a lot of money, but I was able to give it. Now, is that exactly what I want? No, but I can hand that off to somebody and they can, run with it. I was looking for a kind of a big kind of alien style, like this guy walks into this massive spaceship, and sees this thing. And this is one of probably 200 images that I created in about 15 minutes, that I really liked there. This is, I was playing with, this is fine. All I typed in was, this is fine. Like literally all I typed, and this is, I produced a whole bunch of them, but these are very different looks, but all I typed was this. I don't know if you guys know the meme, this is fine, but this is what it came up with. I said, this is fine drinking coffee. That's what I said. Trying to describe to someone what wabi-sabi was, and I was trying to explain it. And so I just typed in, literally the only thing I typed into Midjourney was wabi-sabi. And now when I say that, it's not like it punched out this image. I typed this in and I selected a couple things as it went through, and it was like, and I did it in about 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and I was able to kind of show an image that describes what I was trying, illustrates what I was trying to illustrate there. Again, this, kind of, you're working on a concept of an idea, and this would take an artist to render days, maybe a week to put that together, maybe weeks to put together that one, and to paint it would take, at least a couple days to paint that out. And I can just kind of throw it out there. Is it exactly what I want? No. Is it enough for me to hand to a concept artist and save them days of going down the wrong path? Absolutely. And so that's the thing that I look at. I don't look at these things, I think, in the same way that Tlaloc has it. I don't look at them exactly the way that I'm going to use the images that I created. I'm thinking about them I can explore ideas, and directors do this all the time. They just usually have people to do them for them. Like the directors are like, I'm thinking of this thing, and then they have people they can pay to draw many ideas until that artist finds what the director was already thinking. And so if the director can do that at breakneck speed, and then still hand it back to the artist, which is absolutely necessary. You can't get, it's kind of like, working with a loopy cousin that is kind of like, it kind of answers your question. You're like, were they really listening to me, or were they just making something up? So you're kind of dancing with this process. Now, the one thing I will say is that I follow a lot of people who post Chase. I can't think of Chase's last name, but he's on Twitter. Gold. Like that guy is gold. Like he'll talk about, I figured this thing out. And the most important thing is that he leaves his prompt in the alt text. So you can go in there and look at the images. And what I do is I cut and paste the ones that I like. I cut and paste them into a note. I have a notes document that's my cheat sheet of all these things that worked well. And but it'll be like, again, Tlaloc's absolutely right. If you don't say what you want, there's a certain feel to Midjourney, and there's a certain feel to DALL-E. But if you say, shot, as a National Geographic photographer with this camera and this lens and short depth of field and this aperture, you start to develop things that just look like whatever, or in the style of Ivan Durrell, or in the style of Pixar, or in the style of Rembrandt. You can do those things, and you start to get things that definitely have a very they feel like that thing, and you can combine them. You can say Rembrandt lighting in the style of H.R. Giger, and you get some really crazy things. Anyway, so the but those are the kind of things that you can kind of mix and match, and again explore at a speed that is. But again, I've never used any of the stuff that I'm using as the final product. I use it as concept.
Go ahead, Talak.
Yeah, and I find that one of the things that happens to me in collaborative conversations with directors and other designers is that we talk about some pretty obscure artists. And so the thing that I should try to start to do is that when those obscure artists pop up, they're not Rembrandt. Rembrandt is the sort of thing that is very, very well known in the world. The question is, if somebody has walked into a particular gallery, and if they've walked into a gallery that they've seen, and this is a one-off artist, and they have a photograph of that, and they bring that to us, and they're like, we want to work in this style, or I want to work in this style. What do you guys think? So the question is that I would like to put into my workflow is how to pull those obscurities, those obscure artwork pieces that we're using as inspiration into the process. And I think that absolutely I can get a lot out of asking for something in the style of Rembrandt, and style of Giger, and style of many of the photographers. Like a lot of times we think about a style coming from a photographer, but what if that's not an unknown? What if that's an unknown artist? And so that's interesting to know, and how much is pulled in. How much is pulled into its brain.
And that's where Stable Diffusion starts to, having a local version of Stable Diffusion and being able to inject all that into the system so that it's there. And oftentimes that's working with the artist to do some of those things.
Yeah.
But that's the where you get those, and you can. What I think is funny is you can take images and throw it in and say start with this, and then run with it as well, which is an interesting process.
And just some CJ, both CJ and Adrian have said the person that you might have mentioned was like Chase Lean and
Chase
Ray
Lean.
Wong. That those folks on Twitter X are some of those go-to. And now, while we've spoken a lot about the more visual side of things, I'm also interested to see how voice can be involved as well in this how in the AI part of things. There is a group in Taiwan, I believe it's Sheen House Theater. So they've been using it in a way that when the actors say certain things, that they've got an LED screen that it starts switching the imagery based off of their almost like voice prompts. So it like, the sky's the limit, but just seeing how some other organizations are trying to make use of it as well.
I see this coming my way. When it comes to my projection design work, a lot of times the type of work that I'm involved in is the type of work that I can do with Isadora. I know we have a big Isadora following here in the community, and as we start to be able to use JavaScript and Python inside of Isadora, we can probably tap into some of these models, some of these what are they called? Large learning models, something like that. Yes. And so if we can start to do that, we can output things that are reactions from ChatGPT, or as Isadora hears something, we could make some logic that then asks a question and prompts in ChatGPT, or even in DALL-E or Midjourney, and pulls an image out that we just don't know what's coming. You know what I mean? In the show live, and I kind of see that on the horizon in a big way. The other thing is that I'm starting to hear about folks that are using AI inside of Isadora already. This is happening already. And it's the kind of thing that we were faking in some of our shows just 5 years ago, and we pretended there to be a robot, all this stuff in opera. about 5 or 6 years ago, there was an opera that was sung by robots, quite literally. These literal robots that drove out on stage and like did things and sang, and you know that the reviews were mixed, but 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 they were there. And I drove from a gig in Louisiana to Dallas just because I needed to see this. Like this was something I needed to see, and they went on a limb. It was not a cheap process. You know, opera is the most expensive thing to do in anyway. And, you know, so then you add robots to the mix, and it's like what the, and so I think that there's always some edge case in theater because it is a primarily donation-driven kind of process. So we push the edge a little bit more than in film and in broadcast and in television. We just push that edge. I mean, I did a show where I built a helmet with a monitor on it that a person performed all of their stuff previously recorded, and then we sent with Isadora, we sent his own face to a monitor, and he spoke all of his stuff from his monitor and just did like movements and dance. And this was in 2011, you know, so we're trying things out that are more have some more potential of actually not working.
That's where the magic is, right?
Yeah,
though
right.
That's where the learning and the magic is of like, okay, so it didn't work, but you stumbled into something else you didn't know that you needed, and now, you know, being able to work through that.
A lot of the Twitter X stuff, you know, back when it was just Twitter, we were trying to pull, this is not AI, I apologize, but like we were trying to figure out the API and pull those tweets in so that an audience member could tweet something about the show that then was almost immediately projected. It's the kind of thing that Alex talks about doing on, and many folks here talk about doing on streams, but in a live in the room sensibility. And so I think the sky's the limit when it comes to how much we can start to think about and do with these strong and relatively right now inexpensive processes. I think those prices are going to go up.
The right now part.
Yeah. So
Courtney?
I was going to ask Lalik, since now a lot of opera backgrounds involve projection or LED walls, have you toyed with the idea of having AI create a backdrop using the same prompt night after night, but getting a different result? So just to keep it fresh and keep it different for the attendees that may attend more than one performance. No two performances will be the same because the backgrounds will all change, but be similar in design, like a ballroom background or whatever, castle background. It would be a different castle, a different background every time the performance is done.
I will tell you two things. One, great idea. Two, my heart rate just elevated by twice because I was like so freaked out by the idea of that as a person who wants things to be locked in on opening night and I leave. I just don't want things to be different. But yeah, that's an interesting idea. I think everybody would have to be on board with that from the top. Otherwise, I'd be getting frantic rehearsal reports because performance reports. We get rehearsal reports every day from the stage manager, and we get performance reports every day from the stage manager, and it would just be like, well, Dolly did a bad job today.
Someone to point the blame to. But before we get into these questions and with our panel as well, you've mentioned a couple of tools. If you want to just kind of give a quick overview, maybe of some of the ones that you are using as you are doing the integration.
So ChatGPT has a visualize function now. I've used that. DALL-E, as I've spoken about before, and Midjourney are the main AI versions. Also, Photoshop has a machine learning AI background erase feature that has been cropping up everywhere in my work and also in others' work that I see. Photoshop is a real staple of even that early collaborative process, because then the if you're really facile with Photoshop, you can put things together really fast. And then now you have that AI component, and then that can be an even faster process. And then when it comes to three-dimensional visualization, pre-visualization, I'm starting out in Vectorworks, building those three-dimensional objects and spaces and venues. And then you can actually connect that with a button click to one of the vendors through Unreal Engine. And you can drop that over and utilize some of the better lighting. Because the thing about the lighting in Vectorworks is it's not quite as good with the natural fall off of beams, and it takes longer to get there. But you can drop it into Unreal Engine and just feel much more real in a very immediate way. And that's useful for what has been incredibly useful for me as I'm trying to pitch a scenic design, because sometimes I do scenic design too. So if I build something three-dimensionally in Vectorworks, send it over to to Unreal Engine, and then take 4 or 5 different viewpoints in Unreal Engine into images and send those over to the director, I get a yay or nay and a heartbeat, and I can move on. Like that is incredibly powerful in terms of understanding what is needed in a particular design.
Alex?
Yeah, the other thing to look at is runway AI. So that's another one that's doing video of your descriptions of what you're looking for. And I was thinking about the whole idea of responding and having the idea of improv could be really, really interesting, where you are. I've done a couple things. My version of this sometimes is, because this is the most simple version of this, is it's not as fun anymore because it's too predictive. But for a long time, you'd always get the next word that it thinks you're going to say that would pop up, and I would just say yes, 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 yeah. I would just start tapping on it. Then it would just build this crazy story as if some maniac had just kind of put together this crazy, connection of a story. But I think that there'd be really interesting of being able to go back and forth with AI, like have actors sitting there, and one of them is just reacting to what it's hearing, and then just saying what it's going to say, and someone maybe is speaking for it, or eventually a voice is speaking to it. And I think that it would be interesting. I think that'd be more interesting online. I think with all the money at stake and infrastructure, doing it in a stage would make me very nervous, like Talak. But I think it'd be really fun to have do improv on Zoom, for instance, and just go be back and forth. And these are the characters, and these are the people doing stuff. And we're going to do something live, and we have no idea what I would enjoy that as someone who did a lot of improv in my younger years. It'd be really fun to just kind of react to something that's constantly, and if you tell it, the interesting about AI is we used to bring different actors in because they'd bring different things to what you're doing. But if AI, you say, you are this person, and then it will react somewhat like that person all the way through, which would be really fun.
All right, Jason, let's get into these questions.
Gladly. Douglas Carmichael writes in, could you easily connect ChatGPT to a synthetic character on stage like MetaHuman with a bit of Isadora?
Hello.
Absolutely, you could do it. I don't think easy comes into play, because if you're doing it in an easy way, it's probably going to be done in a poor way. So the way that I look at it is, we can make it happen, but then we have to refine it. We have to refine it so it works in the way we need it to work. We have to refine it in such a way that becomes a palatable and beautiful experience for the audience. And that's where it needs to not be easy. And I'm not saying that the thing itself should not be easy, but you should not stop at where it's done. And so you make it work, and then you work on it and work on it and work on it, and you probably cut it. I mean, that's how this business works, right? You cannot be precious with any of these processes, and you can't do it for the reason of the technology. Because if you do it for the reason of the technology, there's nothing behind it. And if there's nothing behind it, it's going to get cut, and you've just lost a lot of money, or you've just lost a lot of your own time. So I would say, watch out with easy.
Next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania writes in, could you see AI being leveraged in order to provide unique experiences for spectators that differ from ticket to ticket?
Yeah, I think you could, but it's a matter of figuring out how to do that. Is there a matter of augmented reality for each person. Having, well, talk about expensive. We could have, everybody has a Vision Pro. And so they have their own experience of a particular live process on stage. But again, these are the sort of things that answering this question right now seems almost problematic, because it's the kind of thing I want to get in a room with 10 people or 3 people or whoever the designers are and director is and really gnash on it. You know what I mean? That's the process that I love about this job is, 7, 8 months or years ahead of time, start thinking about what this process is, what this project is going to be. And sometimes I will say this, it happens less on some things than others. Some directors don't think lighting designers should be part of the collaborative process until the set is completely designed. And so I have to learn how to be incredibly careful about how I say, you haven't left any room for me to light this show at all. Like, there's no room for me. There's a ceiling. And like, how do you want me to get light in there? There's one door. That means I can bring light into one door and then have front light and have it be completely flat. So how do I say that? How do I have that conversation in a way that actually elevates the process instead of just turning them off to collaborating with me? Which I know doesn't have anything to do with AI, but it kind of does, right? Because you want to be part of the generative process of anything. And so I have to work to get into those meetings.
Alex?
I'm going to go off on that tangent that Tlaloc just opened up there just for a second while we're talking about this. Is over time I'm on a transition from someone who would just tell you exactly the way I want you to do it and exactly how you do it and exactly here's where we're going to go, to relatively often asking people what they think and how they do it. And I propose these things. I this is what I'm thinking right now. And being able to sometimes not listen to it immediately, but I'm still working on that part. But I don't zigzag. I think that there's a certain stability. Like, you kind of have to argue with me and then give me time to think about it for a little while. But when I put on a production, when we're doing productions, oftentimes I bring in people that I think know more about whatever they're doing than I do. Like, that's who I hire to do the thing. The camera operators are better camera operators than I am. The TD is better TD than I am. Like all these things. And then I spend a lot of time asking them what they think. So you put those people in positions and then you sit there and go, so what do you think we should do here? And how do you think we should handle it? Like when I hire Brian Maddox or Mickey or other people to do audio for me, I don't really I tell them what I'm trying to get done. I don't tell them what to do. So when Brian's sitting there in a truck with me, I have no idea what he's doing. I don't know what he's doing. I just say, well, we need to make sure we can talk to this person, or we need to have these mics up or whatever, or we need to have access to this. And then he figures it out, and I think that there's a real dance there, that production that some people are better at than others. And I was the worst at it 10 years ago, and I'm still on the road to recovery. So I'm still working through that. But I think that the more you get good at collaborating with the folks that you're working with, the better.
And Courtney?
Yeah, I would love to see an improv group put together an AI-generated play that would change every night. They would have teleprompters positioned in the wings and, out in the audience, above the heads of the audience, so that they would have a basic outline, a prompt that would outline the story and the characters. So they would stay in a particular character, but they'd be co-reading the whole play off the teleprompters that's generated by ChatGPT. A new story every night would be very fresh and very entertaining. And improv actors are pretty good at taking characters and running with them. So
I would do that in a
I would love to
heartbeat.
see that.
I would do that in a heartbeat. That'd be so much fun. You get kind of into a character and then just get handed lines in real time. I would love to have it so I see him at least a second before. But I read it. I could read it out and do it. I think that would be. I think we should get some. I'm in.
That'd be a ton of fun.
That would be great.
That's us. I'm like feeling it could be me improv folks that are watching right now. That would be a lot of pressure. But
I'm sure we get a lot of angry, like, this is we get a lot of like, I can't believe you're doing this, but it'd be fun to just not know what's what's coming next, even
The
for, as the
office
actor.
Yeah,
hours
to not
AI
know.
theater
It's like when the
players.
audience throws out a topic and an improv group will go.
Yeah, we used to do that. Yeah.
But only this time your dialogue is generated and you have to perform the dialogue. And the dialogue is all generated by ChatGPT and you don't know where it's going.
I love that.
And pulling in from the comments here, Richard said, back to the question about just overall AI being leveraged in unique experiences depending on tickets, that yes, look at immersive theater as a model for this. And Talak.
To start off with, 100% agree with Richard. There was an immersive theater model in Berlin that was happening for many years in the early 2000s, where theater groups would make Berlin walking tours, and you would walk through, and then various famous artists that have been in the salons of Berlin, if you will just show up on the walking tour, like in costume, actors in costume. What is the guy's name who does all the Campbell soup cans? I can't, it's left my brain.
Warhol.
Yeah. So Andy Warhol would come out of a bush and start talking to you. And it was just amazing. And I knew a few of the folks that were building those tours, and they were kind of more for the art tourist than they are for the normal run of the mill tourist, but they were pretty fun. But that experience is a completely different experience for each person because you're walking through it, right? And you don't know where you are in the group, and you're going to have anyway. But also, I wanted to say that I think I got completely sidetracked by Richard's comment. So I will talk about something else later.
Chris?
I think you could couple the office hours improv AI theater players with real-time generated backgrounds generated by the audience prompts. So then, you get added, performance points or bonus points if you somehow interact with the new background. There's something here. I mean, this is like, thanks for clicking. There's something here. And if you get the audience involved in steering the dialogue and steering the backgrounds, this could be huge.
Yeah.
I see the wheels. The wheels. I'm here looking at all the panelists, seeing all the wheels going. Talak.
Chris brought me back on topic. I appreciate it, Chris. So I did a show at the very top of the pandemic, or my top in terms of me getting back into shows, that was on Zoom, and it's called Everybody. And everybody, halfway through, there's a lottery as to what character plays what actor plays what character. And so I had to build a thing in Isadora that would randomly pick a series of people that would do what, right? And it took me a long time to figure out how to do that. But finally I did. And that would actually switch what each camera input was doing. So that did different things on the Zoom, on the YouTube output. And it was maddening because at that time we didn't have ZoomISO. So we were also tracking the gallery and pulling people out of the gallery separately. And you should have seen the spaghetti that Isadora was to make that happen. It was insane. But even if you were to build some things like that shifted what particular folks were doing in video in that randomized way, might make for some exciting acting.
And to go just even between like what Richard said and just part of the conversation we've had here now, while we focused on the LED screens and just prompting, my thought goes to possibly like even the business user experience side of things, where if there's some way in like the data that's collected possibly when people sign up for an experience, what, I don't know, keywords or things that could then, depending on their ticket, then yes, they get a certain kind of experience. Not saying any better or worse than, but just from the other side of things, not just the visual side, but just the experience that they have as a ticket holder. What do maybe some of the things they see? What do they get even marketing wise? Just there are other sides to it as well. Just wanting to bring in like the whole theater experience. Well, that was just like my mind was just thinking of other ways that that could be involved too. And going back to what you said earlier, Talak, even though you felt like you were going down a rabbit hole, I think there's a valid point there too of how soon you get brought into when production is like where they are. That's an important part of this conversation as well, as like when to bring these elements in and the sensitivities of those that are, this is their livelihood they've been working on for such a long time. And then, okay, here we're recommending AI where there's just still that conversation of like talent and machine. So I think that it's probably a completely different question, but you just made some valid points there. Alex?
I do think one of the reasons that people come to a live event is to be part of it. I think that's not the only reason. Sometimes they just come to experience it. But when I look at the things that people are going to remember when I'm doing events, and I'm doing them whether they're online or in person, when the audience is involved, we see this huge interaction. So finding ways, whether it's using AI or using other things, there are a handful of music artists like, Bobby McFerrin, and there's, I can't think of the other guy's name right now, that does lots of different instruments and plays the audience. Like he literally plays the audience, and it's an amazing thing. And I always feel like, well, people are gonna remember that. Like, they're gonna remember being part of that thing. That's why you go to that, whether it's at a movie theater or whether it's at, and I think that we've gotten away from that in a lot of places. And I think that AI can help us. I know for what we look at in the future of audience interaction is AI allowing us to create these giant scaled events and still respond to the audience appropriately, because we can move through all of their comments and all their questions, at a speed that we could never do. Even if we put 100 people on it, they couldn't do it because they're different minds, that are all trying to do the thing at the same time. You have to use AI to do it.
Right. And that's what they're saying, like personalization, your ability to like really get down to what that specific person needs and provide that,
Right.
exceptional service there. Talak?
I think this is also speaking towards a little bit of a pressure between sort of the handmade thing and the digital thing. And this has come up a lot of times in my collaborative processes where, sometimes we're required to use a particular technology like LED screens. And it comes at a sort of problematically, right? Like an LED screen is an LED screen is an LED screen. People know what it is. People see it and feel it, right? And I think the sphere is probably an antithesis to what I just said, because you feel like you're actually in a thing from what I can have read. I don't know if that's true, but that's not the case in a theater because you have a frame, right? And so you can very easily see that this is an LED screen. So what we did in a recent project is we covered every bit of that LED screen with crinkly fabric that was painted with Elmer's glue. And so people didn't know if they were looking at a real shadow or if they were looking at a shadow from the LED screen. They didn't know if they couldn't tell, or they shouldn't be able to tell. Sometimes there were some technical things that made it a little too obvious. But that was from day one, when we knew we had to use this screen, that was our whole goal, was to make it feel like an organic experience. And because the original process of that show was in the catacombs in a cemetery in Brooklyn, which was incredibly visceral for 90 people, right? Where the spiders were actually falling on your shoulders. And I'm not kidding. And so, and you're running, I had to run cable across a few grave sites in order to get the generator far away enough so you didn't hear it in the catacombs. So that visceral experience that was the reason that this show got sold forward is something we don't want to lose. So how do you make that be the case if you're showing a square with pictures, right? We've got to make it feel like a spider could fall on your shoulder. And that's a really poor way of putting that, but I think you get what I'm trying to say.
Alex?
I was reading this article about all the reasons that Marvel's struggling right now. And, they're legion at the moment. And one of the things that I think I thought of while I was reading the article, it wasn't so much what was in the article, was how sensitive we are becoming to things being fake. And, I think that there's this disconnection, like I was actually watching a Marvel film over the weekend and noticing how many of the effects that I noticed, like the physics aren't right, the comp isn't right, this isn't right. And it just feels like you're just throwing pixels at the screen. You don't feel like you're like when you watch, and someone was posting on Twitter over the weekend that it was like good visual. I mean, films with no visual effects are just films with great visual effects. like that it was done with all the needed detail. And I think that, when we think about, the reason I think about that is when you were talking about the LED wall, I was talking to someone, we were working on the show with somebody and they were going to have LED walls. And I said, I was like, oh, we should build the set and everything else. And they were like, oh, we don't want to build it with wood. And I was like, like you might, you might want to do that because and especially as it comes to live. So when it comes to theater and the live, what I do, allowing us to dance with the live performance is something that oftentimes we build infrastructures that make that hard, and I think that, being able to have it be different every single time, being able to have some, not a lot different. Like I went to a play yet last night when my daughter was playing bass and in the pit. And so I was watching it and, it's different, that it's live and it's different every single time. It's not quite the same performance. And I think that there is something very visceral out there that we are losing with a lot of these things. And I think that AI has the risk of doing that. I think you're going to find social networks in the future that they're going to use pass keys, they're going to use other things like that, and they're going to force you to not be a bot. Like they're going to say, this social network is 100% not automated, 100% manual. Like you can't automate anything here. All you can do is be a human being and be in it. And I think that that's probably going to be part of the next generation.
And that ties in really well with Vic's comment here in the chat. He says, Seal physically engages his audience. He'll go into the crowd and dance with, sing with, and just put his hand on shoulders. Engagement. Yeah. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael writes in, could you see theater equipment vendors adding AI-assisted tools to, say, lighting console software?
Alot?
Yeah, I think it's the kind of thing where 20 years ago, I couldn't imagine a lighting console having an augmented reality or a three-dimensional pre-visualization or currently visualization product. So I can't easily imagine how that would be something in a lighting console, but maybe it would help you patch a show. Like maybe it could know ahead of time the kind of light you would probably have in that position or in that channel. If it starts to learn your channeling, as a lighting designer, I use the same channels setup pretty much every time so I can remember where to go. If it starts to learn that, it might be pre-patched. It's an exciting idea.
Courtney?
Yeah, I was going to ask Paul, can they use AI to replace follow spot operators with VARI Lites that actually follow the person around the stage using tracking like they do with camera PTZ tracking so that you can change the lighting according to where the character moves and it follows them, tracks them.
Yeah, I think that would be pretty easy to do because there's already a system within the ETC consoles that can follow a little box that follows them around. So yeah, I think you could make that happen in a big way just by camera input and then tracking.
Facial recognition or something.
Mm-hmm.
Next question.
Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri writes in, have companies like VARI Lite incorporated AI?
Not yet. They haven't yet, but I bet you they will.
Wow. Well, Talak, this is always like the part that I like to just get into. Like we've gone all over the place, which was the goal of this conversation, to really just imagine what the possibilities could be. And even in unpacking that, hopefully we can get Jefferson I hope I'm saying it. I'm like giving it a
Ridenour.
Ridenour.
I'd like to bring him in. Yeah, for sure.
Getting him to come in next. Any additional parting words that you just around this conversation for us to just, okay.
Yeah, I think if there's anything that anybody that's not in theater could take from this is that collaboration is the sort of thing that is greater than any of the parts. Bring people in early and don't disallow them from having ideas that are beyond what you've had. Because you're gonna go to that meeting and you're gonna come out of it going, wow, I didn't know that this was a possibility. So collaborate.
Collaboration is a great. Thank you so much, Halak, to our panelists. Thank you so much for just your conversation, your ideas. I think we have something going there with the improv and AI. So we'll see. Chris, you're going to take the lead there. To our producers, thank you so much for your questions. And the chat has been on fire. So thank you so much for that. And of course, our back-end team, without which this would not be possible at all. So thank you. Now, coming up this week, tomorrow, we've got 3D graphics starters. So you want to come check out the tips to help you if you're just getting started with your 3D graphics. On Wednesday, we've got a lab, and I hopefully will not butcher this, but it's Core. Is it Core?
Korg. So this is part 2 of the lab that we had before. So so you should go back. There's 2 things to watch before Wednesday. One is to go. Chris put out there's a great video on our YouTube channel that has Chris kind of walking through the pipeline that he's using the Korg. This is the little piece of hardware that Chris is going to show us about. But how he does and he and I are going back and forth. So I haven't done anything from yet last week. I was going to over the weekend because I was so excited, and then I was like, nope, I'm going to leave it where it is. And Chris and I will just pick up where we left off. So the other one to watch, if you're interested, is, and we have an enormous number of people that have been pinging me going, well, I just reorganized my whole thing and I just did all this based on your videos. So go back and look at last Wednesday as we kind of work through that. And then we're going to finish it this Wednesday. This is kind of part of our new lab ideas. And so if you like it, let us know as well. Let me know.
Yes, and for the rest of the schedule, you can head over to officehours.global to get all of that together. And let's see, of course, how far have we traveled? We have traveled on the Talak traversal 49,092 miles. That's 79,005 kilometers. That's more than 388 million bananas for scale. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you in After Hours. See you.
Good to have you back, Liberty.
Yeah, welcome back.
Be back. Thanks, y'all. So much to process with today's convo.
Consistently the most interesting group of people I've ever met.
I'm working on artificial stupidity, but don't tell me.
Is it iterating rapidly or de-iterating rapidly?
It mostly just goes, I don't know.
It's like, wow, what a great idea.
Or it comes up with lots of opinions based on theoretical knowledge. But
I'll get that wrong a lot.
Let me tell you how this really works, because I read it on Quora. This is exactly the way this works. I actually triangulated it between Quora and Google and Bing. And now
consensus between Bing, Quora,
and now I know. I'm sure that this is the way it works. Sorry.
Oh, it's so good.
That was